Pastor Crutchfield with faithinspires.org, and today we want to talk about using God-given gifts to find your way through crisis. A little over a year and a half ago, I suffered a heart attack. So I know what it's like to sit flat on your back in that ambulance, wondering how much longer you got. A little over a month and a half ago now, came Hurricane Harvey, and my family and I lost nearly everything we had. So I know what it's like to have soldiers knocking on your door, putting you in an airboat, taking you away from your home of many years, not knowing whether you see it again or not. I know what it's like to arrive at an evacuation shelter, cold and damp and shivering. So when I tell you about the techniques and things that I tell you about, spiritually and otherwise, understand that it comes not only from my very deep knowledge of Scripture, but I've had to battle crisis in my own life. I know the techniques that I share with you work because I've used them. Today we want to talk about gifts. Everybody has different gifts. And those gifts can come in two different varieties. Mark Batterson, the Christian author and the pastor of National Community Church in Washington, D.C., talks about God's gifts as one of God's 7 love languages. One of the 7 dominant, most important ways that God tries to speak to us in our life. And when do we not need to speak to God more or to hear from God more than when we're going through a crisis? Whether it be a small everyday crisis, like we have a flat tire on the way to work, or whether it be a large national life-changing crisis like Harvey, a Category 4 hurricane. The important thing to do, like I say, these gifts come in 2 different kinds. There are internal gifts and external gifts. First thing I want to look at are the internal gifts. Internal gifts are special abilities that God gave us. And God gave us these abilities to navigate us through what we're going to experience in life. And He gave everybody different gifts. For instance, a lot of people seem to feel that I have a gift for teaching, which is part of the reason why I do these videos. Other people have a gift for music. Other people are athletically gifted. I know a lot of people who are able to decrease their stress and their anxiety levels in or out of a crisis by going to the gym on a regular basis or by jogging every day. Being physical helps them ebb off the things that are holding them back. And we need to understand that this is a gift God gives us. When my grandmother passed away several years ago, it was a very sad time. It was hard. She was my favorite grandmother. She's the one that I spent all the time with growing up. But it is my belief that God gave me a poem, and I wrote a poem about how Grandma went home on Mother's Day. And it was very therapeutic for me not only to write that poem, but to share it with other people. Especially when I shared it with other people, and other people going through loss in their life benefited from the same poem I wrote to soothe and ease my feelings. Now, the other kind of gift you can have is an external gift. And this is where you get into things like your support networks, your pastor, your church family. I've said before in other teachings, God works through His people. My home church campus pastor and I were speaking a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling him that one of the things I teach people, I teach them that when you pray for somebody's problem, don't be surprised if God's answer is you. God put all the people in this world for a reason. particularly for us as Christians, because it's important for us as Christians when we face crisis to have the reinforcement of other strong Christians to back us up. So the important thing to remember for today's lesson is, if you're facing a crisis, and I don't want to get into the business of this person suffered more or this person suffered longer, that's immaterial. If it's a crisis to you, it's a crisis. Maybe somebody else has been through more. Who cares? But when you're going through crisis, the important thing to remember and to look for the gifts that God has given you. Look for the talents that have always brought you enjoyment, that have always brought you strength. Because these are likely ways that God is trying to talk to you, even in the midst of the crisis you're going through. Now, I have other people, they ask me all the time, they say, Pastor, how do I know if a gift is from God or from Satan or from something else? Well, there's one key test. Is the gift I'm looking at, is it constructive or is it destructive? Drinking too much, for instance, can be very destructive. Therefore, it cannot be from God. There are other things you can do as far as addictions, as far as temptations that are destructive. They cannot be from God. Whereas, like I said earlier, look at the things that bring you comfort but do not hurt your life. Look for the things that make you stronger. Look for the things that bring you peace. Real peace. Not things that, say, like alcohol or drugs that numb you, but things that make you a more capable, more functional person. This is Pastor Robert Crutchfield with faithinspires.org. Have a nice rest of the day.